Greetings from Lausanne and welcome to today's CEO Dialogue with Jessica Sibley, CEO of Time. Now, when I say Time, all of you watching us will immediately think of Time magazine, you know, the one with the red rectangled border on the cover page. Time has indeed been an iconic magazine, and each of us probably has at least one story or article we remember reading sometime in our past. But Time, the company, is a lot more than Time, the magazine, and we're very fortunate today to be able to discuss both with Jessica Sibley. Jessica became CEO of Time Group in 2022, just in time to celebrate Time's 100th anniversary this year. Jessica has devoted her career to the news/media industry on the commercial side of these organizations rather than the news side. Is this a fair characterization?
That's correct.
Jessica, you've worked at the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and Condé Nast Groups before working for several years at Forbes Group, the largest business media brand, as Senior Vice President of US and Europe and Chief Sales Officer, then Chief Revenue Officer, and ultimately as Chief Operating Officer. Jessica, a warm welcome to you and thank you for making the time to be with me today after being with us last night for IMD's International Alumni Event.
Thank you so much for your warm welcome, and it's just such a pleasure to be here.
So first, let me start with a question that's going to be obvious for you, but less obvious for some of us. Historically, press groups made money by selling advertising in publications that readers paid for. I think that's what happened for a number of decades. Of course, this model has changed dramatically over the last few decades. Please tell us how the industry has changed and why, and what this means today for press groups.
Well, the one thing I will say about the media industry is that change is constant. Consumer behavior changes constantly, and media is trying to keep up with how consumers are engaged with content. I would say that the paid product is not new. You mentioned that I had worked at the Wall Street Journal, and if you go back in time, you'd have to buy your newspaper in the morning, even before it could be delivered to you. There was some advertising business as well, but it was largely that type of consumer behavior where you valued a product, you had a habit with it, and you were used to paying for it. I think the expansion to digital has allowed incredible changes, new models, and new opportunities for monetization. Everyone's looking at their business differently. There are some today that are no longer leaning in on advertising. They're no longer pursuing advertising as a real business. And paid products is really important. They reach a specific niche audience with specific niche content, and advertising isn't relevant.
Okay.
And then there are other models where it's only advertising, right? So if you think about some of the largest platforms, whether that's Google or Instagram or TikTok, you don't have to pay for that. You go on and you enjoy and spend as much time there. New other formats, which started out as paid, whether that's maybe Netflix or some other subscription-based businesses and only subscription-based businesses, are now moving into advertising and subscription-based businesses. Okay. My 25-year-old daughter is very happy to pay for Hulu and watch ads. She pays a much lower price. She'd rather spend her money as a 25-year-old in some other capacity. And so she enjoys that opportunity and that flexibility.
So what I'm hearing from you is there isn't one single model that has replaced the old you pay for Time magazine and also Time magazine gets money for ads. What you're saying is there's now a multitude of models.
That's exactly right. And throughout my career, we've even experimented and explored, giving you a product that you pay for that doesn't have any ads in it, and you pay a premium for that. So there's lots of models, there's lots of opportunities, and every leader, every business leader, every CEO of all of the media companies continue to test, learn, and make changes along the way, especially as consumer behavior changes as well.
This is one of the big decisions that you made already in your tenure, to essentially lift the paywall on 100 years of archives. So I guess you've just said one aspect was this notion of digital equity and digital accessibility. Was that the only driver, or were there other factors that led you to make this decision?
No, that's a great question, and it was a very important and difficult decision that I worked very deliberately on, and very thoughtfully and very carefully. Certainly, it wasn't the popular decision, if you will, because everyone was chasing a different model, which was this paid model. I took a different approach at Time, based on our brand, based on our business, and based on our journalism, and really leaned into the mission and the purpose of Time. I felt that it was important to make Time available in our 100 years to anyone, everywhere in the world, for free. I was inspired by Hans Vestberg, the CEO of Verizon, and I had an opportunity to meet him and sit down, and I was so inspired and informed about what he was doing and what his platform was, working directly with the World Economic Forum, working directly with the Edison Alliance, and making a commitment to get 1 billion people online by 2025, and how important this is, and how it's not just knowledge information, there's a climate event, and if you don't have access to information and technology, these are life changing moments. And I was very inspired by that. So I felt like it was the right decision for our mission and our purpose. It was the right decision for our business. The other thing is, it's so important for a brand like Time. We've celebrated, and we're celebrating our centennial all year long, to continue to reach new audiences.
Okay.
And so part of opening our paywall is allowing access to audiences around the world for free, wherever they are, whenever they want to bookmark and come to time.com. We also have not only the largest audience, and we're at 120 million. Just got the stat today from our team, 120 million global, which is our largest audience in our 100-year history. Also, we have our youngest audience. So 45% are 35 and younger. And I think it's just so important to keep Time timely, timeless, relevant in today's environment, and reach larger audiences. Really important to me as a CEO of this company to reach more women and people of diversity.
Now, you've already started answering my next question, which is about your Time 3.0 transformation program. And in particular, you've told us some of the things that you're doing on the magazine. And one of my questions was going to be, how do you rejuvenate a reader base? How do you make a brand relevant to generations that may not have access, may not have been as exposed to it? So one of the ways you just explained to us is indeed to lift the paywall and make the archive accessible. Yesterday, I also heard you say we have our youngest editor-in-chief. So what are some of the other things that you have been doing to nurture this rejuvenation of the brand and of the reader?
We already have, and we're well on our way. I think it's so important to make sure that you stay core to your mission, you stay core to your history and what that means and why it's so important. And you lean in onto new stories and telling the stories about the people that are culturally important and relevant today. And it's really, it's a very simple business. Media seems so complicated, and as I say, it's constantly changing, but it's a very linear, straight business. You have an incredible brand, and if you stick to that purpose and that mission, and lean in on your brand, the differentiation of your brand, and really what it stands for, the next part of the journey is the editorial, the journalism, the content, right? And we have so many new different formats. We've got video journalism, audio journalism, photojournalism, social journalism. We curate people on stage at events. That's part of our content. And so that's really our product, right? Our product is our content and the stories that we're telling, the people, the the identification of the people that are so interesting. We write for them, we write about them, and that's what drives audiences. So if we're telling the right stories with our journalism, we're going to drive the right audiences. And then the next part is marketers, right? So that's the business model. I'm a commercial CEO. I've run revenue my whole career at incredible places like Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal and Forbes, and now at Time. And it's like, how do we talk to marketers that want to reach those audiences and align with the content that they feel is meaningful and matters to drive their business results? And so we are working with the most important global blue chip brands that are best in class, and they have really large budgets. And they want to align with a brand like Time because we are so trusted. They're looking at our content, whether it's in our magazine or on time.com, across our social handles, what we're doing on stage with our live event business, and they want to align around that. So I think it's really interesting. And I think when I look back at the year, because I'm coming up on a year, what are the important stories that we told? And how do I get to some of those new audiences? Well, we've already done that. One huge milestone and moment was when we put Bad Bunny on our cover. Now, if you don't know Bad Bunny, your kids definitely do. Bad Bunny gave 2 interviews. He is rocket ship in his career right now. He gave 1 interview to Billboard. He has to, industry. And then he gave a second interview to us exclusively at Time. It was our first ever Spanish English translated cover. It was a Spanish only interview. We did video, we did photo, we did audio. We had an all Hispanic Cuban-American crew, from the stylist to everyone behind the cameras, in front of the cameras. And we were picked up by places like Telemundo and CNN Espanol, and audiences that had never had a chance to engage with Time. And so that's a really big moment for us. We're going to continue to tell those stories and have those cultural moments, again, to be part of everything that I just spoke about.
Now, you've already started sketching the big aspect of the transformation, which is that we're no longer a magazine. We are about content, and this content is going to be produced and disseminated in many ways. My understanding is that as a part of your transformation, you have 6 new platforms. Can you kind of take us through them?
I'm going to answer that question in 2 different parts.
Okay.
You mentioned Time 3.0.
Yeah.
So I should say that Time is private and independent. We are owned by co-chairs and co-owners Mark and Lynn Benioff. They purchased Time out of Time Inc. Meredith in 2018, and it's their largest private investment.
And we should say, for those who may not recognize the name, that Mark Benioff is the CEO of Salesforce.
That's exactly right, founder and CEO of Salesforce. And I work for them and with both of them in my role as CEO.
Okay.
And when Mark had identified me as a candidate to join and to lead Time, and he asked me to study the business, and he asked me what I would do with it. And I, like anyone, you start and you're like, oh God, this is a really big project and this is really important. And I looked at my computer screen, and the first thing that I wrote down was Time 3.0. And it really became a rallying cry for our company. It's been publicly reported about, and I've been really transparent about what we've been doing. It started out as Time 3.0, a headline, and I think by the time I actually walked in the door, I was on 7 pages in version 7, and it really had 7 leading priorities and goals. And as I head into finishing my first year, we've checked the box and completed and executed all of those 7 priorities and all of those 7 goals. I think Mark Benioff is one of the greatest CEOs of our lifetime and our generation, and he's like always saying to me, priorities. And I said, these are the priorities, they haven't changed. And then he's like, do we reprioritize the priorities? And he was right, I did reprioritize the priorities, but they remain the same. And a lot of we've discussed, but it's the legacy to relevancy, so making sure Time is relevant and telling those stories that are meaningful and matter to audiences and marketers. Revenue, so being a sustainable, high growth business is really critical in terms of our resiliency and solidifying our next 10 years, our next 100 years is a really important initiative for me. Culture matters internally, and hiring the best talent and making Time a place that everyone wants to work at. And I would say, just as you mentioned, Time Magazine, people still introduce me as a CEO of Time Magazine. And
I didn't.
Yeah, our magazine business is so important, but we've done so much to diversify, recalibrate our revenues, have a digital transformation, and lead into so many different great areas. So that leads me to the second part of the question, which is what are those new areas? Yeah. So we've expanded into live events. We went from 2 to 7 to this year. We're going to do over 27 globally. Our customers really want to be in rooms with the people that we curate, the individuals that we have on our stage, and the conversations that we bring to life. Events are amazing because then, as we're here in this incredible studio today, we can capture those conversations and distribute them further to people that maybe aren't in the room. So we've got an incredible global slate of events that we're already executing, and we're going to be at the key places like Davos and COP and leading into impact and AI and all of those topic areas that are so critical to what we cover in our trusted journalism.
Please allow me, if I may, a quick follow-up question on this. So I get the live events, but one of the questions in strategy is always, why us? It's a good idea, but why you? So what's the synergy? I guess one of the synergies is the Time 100 that historically the magazine has identified very famous or people that are making an impact on the world. But what other competitive advantage, I guess, do you have launching a global live events?
Yeah, I would say we're known for Time 100, and it's our 100th year. But we also have extensions of the Time 100. So we have Time 100 Next, where we identify, again, to your earlier question, the next generation of those that are doing incredible things to build a better future and having a huge impact. Time has the permission to not just cover finance or business or technology. We're covering climate, healthcare, culture, entertainment. And one of the things that we did that I'm most proud of is we launched our first ever Time 100 AI, where we identified, again, everyone's talking about AI. We talked a lot about it yesterday at the conference. We identified the most important and influential people in AI today around the world. Okay. And so this started out as a list, but it's now become a global platform where events is part of it. Okay. So we worked for months on making sure that we got it right. We don't just have CEOs, those that are driving billion-dollar valuations, or startups, people whose names you know, and they're leading icons in AI, but we've identified those that are professors, those that are researchers, those that are focused on the regulatory issues, those that are focused on some of the dangers and perils in AI, some that are activists in terms of ethics in AI, those on the creative side, like designers. So it's a really interesting, really robust view of who these people are, and we bring those stories to life. Right. Next week, I am flying to San Francisco. We have an event that we're partnering with Meta on, and we are bringing in 75 of the most incredible leaders who are women in AI to host an evening conversation on this topic area. Many are in San Francisco. San Francisco's had a really hard go, especially through COVID, and AI is going to hopefully transform that city in the most positive way. So that's just one example.
Okay, so you have several Time 100 platforms. To put together these groups, you have to study who should be on it. You have to get in touch with them. You kind of study them, write about them. And then, of course, once you have the connections, you can leverage those connections for these global live events.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so I got the global live events. Time Studios, I think also a big bet.
Big bet, and that was what I was most excited about when I studied the business at Time and decided to join. We, in the last several years, have launched extremely successfully a TV and film division. Okay. This is something that many traditional publishers and media companies have tried and have not been successful at. And it's remarkable what the team at Time has done. And they've really hired industry insiders and industry experts in this area. It's all around our storytelling, right? Our trusted journalism and the way that we're able to tell the most incredible, interesting stories. And what we're able to do with Time Studios is documentaries, formats, series, and again, we have the permission to cover any and every topic. And so I'm really excited about this business. We have an incredible, exciting project around music in terms of archives that have never been discovered until now, of some of the most well-respected, well-known artists in the world, some of whom are still living, some of whom aren't. So we've done music. We're doing a lot in the climate space. Certainly, we've done a lot in the political space, and we're selling these projects directly to Hulu, Amazon, Netflix, CNN, MSNBC, and we're really excited. I actually announced I'm looking for a president of Time Studios, and the interest is so high to join our team and to keep this business really moving in an incredibly positive place.
Two quick follow-up questions, if I may. First one, the list of topics that you mentioned sounds like it is straddling the news spectrum, but also the entertainment spectrum, or the light news. I don't know how to call this. Christina Aguilera doesn't strike me as being in the same domain as climate change somehow. How do you think about this? Was Time always straddling this whole spectrum?
Yeah, it is. And we say, and this comes directly from Lynn Benioff, when it's in history, it's in time.
Okay.
And when it's in time, it's history. And so one moment that I can remember was when Taylor Swift was on the cover of Time. And she said, my place in history has changed forever. I've been on the cover of Rolling Stone and maybe a beauty magazine or a fashion magazine, but it's entirely different now. And I just reflect on that because you think about the year that she's had, the economic value of everything that she's touched and what she's done. And that's what we do. So
Okay.
We're not necessarily covering her concert. We're covering how she's changed an entire industry,
for sure.
and how in such a polarizing place right now, she's brought the world together in a positive, unifying way. We really need that. And so, yeah, we did a tribute to Barbie. You know, Barbie is an icon, but we're focusing on what that means and why that matters, as opposed to just covering, you know, the movie ticket sales,
Right.
And how Barbie brought people back to the theaters. So it's a very different conversation and a very editorial perspective. I don't want to suggest that Time is light because we have a global newsroom. We send journalists to very difficult and dangerous places. They are drawn to that. That is what they do.
Right.
And it is our jobs to get these stories out and to protect our employees and to protect our people.
You're also making significant investments in other businesses. How are you managing the anxiety, the possible resistance from the historical core to these new forays?
Look, I think it's healthy. I think dialogue, conversation, resistance is healthy. As I mentioned, our product is our journalism, and that's produced by our journalists and by our newsroom and our editorial team. That's core, that's critical to who we are and what we do.
Even on the studio side, the new people from the newsroom are involved?
In some cases, they are.
Okay.
I'd like to see more of that, and my strategy and vision for Time Studios is leveraging our IP
Okay.
and some of our incredible journalists, and we're doing a few projects. We're going to do a few more. Our journalists take book leave. We have leading experts in certain topic areas, as I mentioned, AI, and we have done those projects. There's a lot more on our slate that we want to do. We also want to leverage our branded content business, which is Red Border Studios. But back to your question, as I said, Time 3.0, culture, employees. I want everyone to want to work with us at Time, want to work for us, want to join Time, and I want Time to be the best place to work. And part of that is making sure that we're competitive, that we offer the best benefits and the best opportunities for not only our newsroom, but our entire global organization.
Another activity, slightly less obvious to me, website building platform, Time Sites. Help me understand that one.
Yeah, so we have two exciting businesses. You asked about 6. I think we're almost there. Yeah. We acquired a company called Brandcast. We integrated that company to be Time Sites, and it's an incredible expression of building websites. And the way that I would describe it is it kind of is the new PDF. So much communication and information is transferred by screens, and a PDF is just flat and not that dynamic. There might be some visuals and some creative interpretation, maybe some links out. But Time Sites is a really beautiful product. We're using it ourselves as we go to market with some of our biggest customers in technology and financial services. We're using it as our own website to showcase Time and our Time 3.0 and the things that we're doing in events. And we can see the data in real time to see who's interested in Time and if they want to speak at an event, sponsor an event, attend an event. When we go out and pitch Time Studios projects, we have a whole Time Studios sites build where we're leveraging the expression of content in a whole new format. And then the last business.
So if I may, basically you said, wow, these people, they have a great product. And in fact, it's so great that we want to integrate it. We'll use it ourselves as almost as a core competency, and we'll continue to sell it externally.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so I get that. That's internalizing a core competency. Then you have sustainability and climate action platform. In fact, I think you've hired a chief climate officer. Tell us about this.
Yeah, I always like to go first. So I don't believe that there's any other media company that has a chief climate officer, nor a sustainability action platform like Time CO2. If you know anything about Mark and Lynn Benioff, it's definitely part of the work that they're doing in terms of climate and the environment, trees and oceans. We are writing extensively on this topic. We have the #1 climate journalist in the country, Justin Werlen. He's based in Washington, D.C. We are launching our first ever Climate 100 list around the timing of COP. We are going to identify the most important influential individuals in the world right now in climate. So it's really important to us, but we just didn't want to write the stories, identify the individuals who are leading and trying to build a better future and find these solutions. We wanted to do the own hard work ourselves to make sure that we were also on a path to sustainability. And so having the experts inside in so many different areas was really, really important to us. And we're going to lean heavily into Time climate going forward.
Okay, so again, a forward-looking decision saying this is one of the key topics of our time, and we want to have a big footprint and imprint on this topic.
It's also part of what we do in terms of Earth Awards and Impact Awards. Right. I had the great opportunity to travel to Dubai for our Impact Awards event. We're taking this event globally, but when I say it's an event, it's a platform. Fawriza Farhan came up to me. She hugged me. She couldn't believe that she was on the cover of Time and in our pages and in our magazine and on our stage. She said, how would a young woman from Indonesia get recognized by Time in this way? She is an activist who has led the efforts to save the rainforests. So there's just so many different ways that we're going to participate in the climate conversation and do the hard work ourselves.
And this works financially, not only because you have a billionaire owner, but because, as you said earlier, you have these very large corporate customers who somehow want to be associated with these various platforms.
That's exactly right. We're talking directly to chief sustainability officers. We are writing for them. We're writing about them. We're producing curated content in every format and have one-on-one direct relationships with them. We've set up an advisory board where we have leading scientists and people that are conservationists and who are the most well-known, well-respected people in climate. So we're really building this community, and I really like to say this is a really important community because we all need to work together to solve these critical issues.
Now, it so happens that in Europe, I think most of us would look at this and would say, this is very reasonable and forward-looking. In the US, there is a non-trivial debate, ideological debate, where a significant proportion of the population simply does not believe that this is an issue. And in fact, today there's challenges for media. There's this polarization of opinion that shows this ideological challenge. To what extent is this a concern for you? And if so, how do you manage it?
Yes, we're in such a unique position because especially in such a polarized United States of America right now, time is respected and known and trusted on the coasts, in the South, in the Midwest. I've never worked for a media company like that. And I think this is our moment to try to continue to tell the stories of truth and make some sense. I will say my own personal bias, my own personal view is that when you become impacted yourself, when a climate event happens and hits you, your mindset might change. That might change your mindset when it impacts your own life and your own wallet. It will change. And as we're seeing climate right now, it's impacting the world. And I am hopeful and I am optimistic for our future.
And in the meantime, the 30 to 40% of Americans who don't think that climate change is not only, let alone a problem, but also a reality, doesn't bother you?
It bothers me because they don't believe in science, and then there's a lot of other things.
But you're not concerned that they're going to stop buying your content?
I'm not concerned about that. They're maybe not reading our content, but if they are, hopefully we can persuade them and change people's minds. I'm in the business of changing people's minds and changing people's lives for the better. Because I don't get up every day hoping one person is going to buy Time magazine or one new advertiser is going to come in. That's not what fuels me. That's not my passion. That's not why I'm here. I am in the business of changing people's lives for the better.
That's a wonderful segue to the last set of questions I have. As you may know, I'm a professor of leadership, and so I cannot conclude this conversation without asking you a few more personal questions. One is, this is your first CEO position after, among other things, a COO position at Forbes and many other positions. How is the CEO role different? What has struck you so far?
Well, I was CEO ready, and I was prepared to step into this role. I'd been studying the business, and this is what I've done my whole career.
Right.
And I've done this and only this. I never left for a newcomer or a startup. So this was the perfect CEO role for me to be set up for success. So I felt very prepared and very confident that I was going to continue to be an incredible leader and a great CEO. I think I underestimated the weight and the responsibility of being a CEO, and also being the CEO of Time, working with and for Mark and Lynn Benioff, the big rooms, the big stages, and the most important people around the world that I would have access to and be meeting and working with. And that's just been super exciting and also in some days super challenging. But I'm really loving where I am and what I'm doing.
Tell me about the challenges. So the super inspiring I get. I also hear I may not have fully appreciated this particular dimension. So what's the challenging aspect? How does this demand an extra effort?
Yeah, it's just like any business. Some days are glamorous, and most days it's a grind. And media is a really hard business. It's not a business that's growing and recurring revenues. Like, if you think about the origins of advertising, a classified ad is meant to run once. You're trying to sell a car, you put an ad in, you sell the car, and you don't have to run the ad again. And that's the way that the business has kind of continued. You start the year from day zero, day one. This isn't a business of naming rights, or you have those repeat type of sponsorships. So it's exciting because you're always moving in real time fast. I also have to make sure that our journalists are safe around the world, that our newsroom is productive and happy. That's our product. That's really, really important to me. And we're going through a lot of change, and change means uncertainty. And as you said in the beginning, like, we have to do that. We have to take what's so incredible about Time, but continue to make it contemporary and relevant and lead into new models and new platforms. And, sometimes you lose people along the way. And being a new CEO at a new company, working for one of the greatest CEOs, not just top 10, not just top 5, I'd argue top 3 of our generation, is an incredible opportunity and gift for me to learn from someone like that. But like any day, like any job, like any business, there are hard things that you face.
And I think you also gave us an insight on what makes it challenging. It's on one side, there's the revenue aspect in an environment where the basis of value creation and value capture change constantly. Then of course there's the whole transforming of the business, and there's launching new activities without losing the historical core. And also, as you said, a lot of pressure on you representing the organization to the world.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
You're the first female CEO of Time. I thought to myself, wow, that's interesting. I don't have this on my list of questions. And I paused and I thought to myself, actually, I think it's a good thing that I don't have this on my list of questions. It means that when I look at Jessica, I don't see a female CEO, I see a CEO. And I thought that was a good thing. But you also mentioned many times over your career, you found yourself to be the only woman in a room full of men. I got to tell you, it happened to me once. I was the only man in a room full of women. It was a program for female leaders. And I got to tell you, I rarely think of myself as a man. I don't wake up in the morning thinking, hey, I'm a guy. At that particular moment, I got to tell you, I felt the difference. So over the years, and maybe to this day, how salient is this in your mind?
Yeah, I have been the only woman in a lot of rooms, and especially given my age and the places that I've worked. Looking back, those were the rules, and it never really fazed me. I guess in a way I looked at it positively, that I was in the room, and now the rooms have changed, and I've been a driver of that change. I've driven the female leadership at Time, just in the year that I've been there, over 50%. And I'm going to continue to do that. And I've brought in a female chief marketing officer, Sade Muhammad. I elevated Kristen Matson to be chief communications officer. And I mentioned Shyla, who's our chief climate officer. And I'm going to keep doing that and driving forward. I am so lucky in my career that I've been surrounded by incredible men who have mentored me, who have taken a chance on me, who've been great collaborators and partners with me. So I never felt uncomfortable in any of those rooms. I felt, in a way, super special and excited to actually get in that room and to see a better future for myself, for my 25-year-old daughter, and for everyone that I've worked with and for in my career. And again, when I say, like, I want to be in the life of changing people's lives for the better, that's definitely one big part of my narrative.
This is indeed an important aspect. We often talk about it in organizations, is to what extent can the organization create, and it's not necessarily only mentorship, but it's also supporters for diverse candidates. Of course, gender diversity is one aspect of the diversity we want to enhance in organization, but there are other facets of diversity. And it was interesting for you to say, I've had these mentors and these supporters who took a chance and helped.
I mean, you mentioned I'm a first-time CEO working for one of the biggest CEOs of our lifetime, and he took a chance on me in a way. I mean, look, my track record and my reputation speaks for itself. He asked me to study the business. I know that he called 50 to 70 people about me because I still hear, Mark called me and asked me about you. And but he took a chance on me in a way because I am a first-time CEO I'm a CEO at a new company,
Right.
and I'm crushing it for him and for Lynn. So I feel really good about that, and I'm going to continue to focus on diversity. I think that's equally and critically important. It's not new. I call it my forever and ongoing project. You mentioned the Chief Climate Officer, and first and only media company. I would say I also at Forbes named a chief head of not just a DEI head, but representation and inclusion practice. And we built a practice and a business with a real P&L. I was the first media company to name Sade Muhammad in that role. I don't think it exists, and it's been many years since that. The team presented DEI data to me recently, and I asked them to go back and relook at the data because I want to know at time where we've improved and also where the gaps are and where we haven't improved and where the challenges are. And I don't want to look at it in one cut, the C-suite or the entire employee base. I want to look at everything. And I said, I want to look at director level. I want to look at VP and SVP and my reports. And
not just look at averages.
Yeah, because maybe I've worked at companies where it was a diverse company and there was not a single woman on the board. Well, there wasn't a single woman in the C-suite. There wasn't a single person of color, or I've worked at companies that had that, but the rest of the employee base wasn't diverse. So I think it's, you got to look at everything and identify where the improvements need to happen.
Let's assume you just hired me and I'm starting to work for you today. You invited me into a meeting and you're going to establish the rules of engagement between us. How would you describe yourself as a leader? I guess I already have a feel from these few minutes. And what are the non-negotiables that you would expect from me?
I don't take myself that seriously. I'm very transparent. I'm a very big communicator and culture person. I want people to really enjoy and feel so positive about the work and have fun. And I would be like, how was your kid? How was your, I want to know something personal about you and connect with you. I think human connection and human connectivity is so important. I've been able to just have a huge followership because people respect and trust me, and I've always led by example. I've never felt that just because I have a job or a certain size office or a title that anyone would do anything other than I have to gain their trust and most importantly their respect. I'm definitely difficult and demanding, and I'm very fast. I move very quickly, and I try to get team members that aren't duplicative to what I bring, but can complement and help sort of some of the areas that I don't have the same passion for and interest in. I have a really strong chief operating officer who I brought into Time recently, who really complements and allows me to lean into my strength and my superpower as he is able to lean into his. And I think that then we could add so much value. And you're a leadership expert. And one of the things that I learned, and I'd love to ask you this question and what you think, but there was always this practice that you were trying to help leaders be better at what they sucked at.
Yes.
and the development area. And if you're not organized, we need to work with you on organization. And then all of a sudden it changed and it was forget about that. Actually fuel the fire, put the gas in the tank on where leader, if you have a creative leader, fuel that and get someone else to complement the creative leader who's more of a process or different type of an organizational leader. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because if you're never going to be good at something, you're not going to like it. And if you don't like it, you're never going to be good at it. So what I want to do is I want to run this business. I want to run this business in a corporate, disciplined way with lots of accountability and be able to track and forecast. And, I got asked the question, like, where are you going to be in 10 years? And you're never going to be able to answer those questions if you don't know where you are today and where you're headed tomorrow. Sure. But yet, so I need really strong operator. I need strong finance. I need those people to be really strong in those areas so that I can get out and have these conversations, travel the world for Time, be the face of Time, build this brand, and most importantly, be with customers and build the business.
So you asked how we think of these issues. Steve Jobs used to have this expression, making a dent on the universe. What I often say in class is, you're not going to make a dent on the universe by going from being terrible at something to being slightly less terrible. You're going to make a dent on the universe by being at your strength and playing on your strength. Now, it so happens that sometimes people's challenges can be so severe that those limitations can become derailers or even preventers. So I do not subscribe to the theory that says you should only do positives and never look at people's possible development areas. But I agree with you that we make a dent on the universe by being at our best and playing on our strength. Last question. Jessica, you love your job because?
I've earned it. I'm at the right place at the right time in my life, in my career, and I can't wait to see what next year brings.
Jessica, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All the best to you.
To you and IMT for having me. I really appreciate it.